Mom walks onto the stage, calm but confident, pauses, looks across the audience, deep breath, then begins. You ever feel like you're living your life wearing a mask? Like no matter how much you achieve, there's still a quiet emptiness inside because you're not being seen for who you really are. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you showed up as you? Not the version others expect. Not the version that's easy to digest. Not the one trying to be perfect, liked, accepted, praised. But the real you. You see, somewhere along the way, we were taught that who we are, just as we are, isn't good enough. So we learn to hide, to shrink, to perform. We trade authenticity for approval. We silence our voice to keep the peace. We bury our dreams to make others comfortable. And in the process, we lose ourselves. But here's the truth. Your authenticity is your superpower. Your story, your scars, your voice, your vision. They're all pieces of your divine design. And the world doesn't need another copy. The world doesn't need another perfect act. The world needs what only you carry. You weren't born to blend in. You were born to stand out. Not in arrogance, but in truth, in confidence, in honesty, in soul. You were born to live as a bold, fearless, authentic expression of who you really are. And it's time to reclaim that version of you. Not tomorrow. Not when people approve. Now. Because when you stop hiding, you start healing. When you stop performing, you start living. So I'm not here to tell you become something greater. I'm here to remind you already are. You just have to stop editing yourself for people who don't even know how to appreciate your realness. Let them misunderstand you. Let them question you. Let them doubt you. Because you are not here to impress the world. You are here to impact it. And that impact begins the moment you decide. I will no longer apologize for being who I am. I will no longer shrink to fit into rooms not built for me. I will no longer carry the burden of being someone I'm not. I will be the authentic me. Loudly, proudly. And when you do that, watch how the right doors open, the right people appear, and the weight you've been carrying finally lifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. So go ahead, be the authentic you. The world's been waiting. There's something powerful that happens when a person finally steps into the full awareness of their uniqueness. It's not loud. It's not boastful. It's not even always noticeable to others right away. But inside, it's undeniable. There is a quiet shift that changes how they carry themselves, how they see the world, and how they allow the world to see them. This shift often begins with a realization that they've spent far too long trying to fit in, trying to be agreeable, trying to adapt in order to be accepted. Maybe it was how they were raised. Maybe it was the circles they found themselves in. Maybe it was subtle, a series of compromises over time. But eventually, they began to drift from the person they were meant to be. They adjusted their tone so they wouldn't sound too much. They watered down their ideas so they wouldn't be judged. They silenced their boldness so they wouldn't offend. And little by little, without even noticing, they became a shell of the person they once knew. They wore faces that didn't belong to them. They followed dreams that weren't theirs. They nodded along when their soul wanted to scream. It's easy to fall into that trap, especially in a world that constantly tells us who we should be. We're bombarded with standards, opinions, filters, and expectations. From a young age, we're rewarded for obedience and punished for nonconformity. We're taught to color inside the lines, to wait our turn, to not speak too loudly, to not stand out too much. So we adjust, we adapt, And in the process, we forget. But here's the thing. What we forget, the world misses out on. Because when you deny the parts of you that make you different, you're not just hiding from yourself. You're withholding a gift that someone else desperately needs. That voice. Someone is waiting to hear it. That perspective. Someone is struggling because they've never seen things through your lens. That way you think, that way you love, that way you fight for what matters. Someone's life could be changed just by being in the presence of someone like you. And yet we hesitate. We worry. What if we're too weird? What if people don't get us? What if they walk away? But what if they don't? What if instead your honesty sets someone else free? What if your courage gives someone else permission? What if your truth is the light someone's been stumbling in the dark to find? We often think that the world is changed by big, dramatic gestures. But most of the time, it's changed by simple decisions. Quiet bravery, consistent integrity, the willingness to be seen fully and still stand tall. There's nothing more disarming, more magnetic than a person who knows who they are and lives from that place without apology. Not because they're trying to prove something. Not because they have something to prove. But because they've finally discovered the power of being whole. They walk into a room and don't scan for approval. They make decisions based on alignment, not applause. They no longer need validation to feel valuable. And ironically, it's those people who attract the most trust. Because people crave what's real. They're exhausted from the fake. They're tired of the scripted. They don't want to see perfection. They want to see humanity. They want to see someone who's not trying to impress, but simply is. This isn't about being loud. It's not about being rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It's about being rooted, grounded, anchored in a sense of self that doesn't shift with every opinion or trend. It's about walking through life with a certain kind of clarity. The kind that says, I know who I am. I know what matters to me. And I will not betray that for anything. That kind of person can walk away from opportunities that don't align. They can set boundaries others don't understand. They can speak truth even when it's unpopular. And they can sleep at night knowing that, win or lose, they stayed true. Of course, living this way isn't always easy. It can be lonely at times. There will be people who misunderstand. There will be moments of self-doubt. There will be seasons where it feels like no one sees or values what you bring. But here's what's different. When you know who you are, you stop needing the crowd to clap in order to keep going. Your motivation isn't external. It comes from somewhere deeper. It comes from knowing that you're aligned. And that alignment is worth more than any temporary applause. So the challenge is this: can you be that person? Can you live in such a way that you no longer need to wear different faces depending on who's watching? Can you show up consistently, even when it's inconvenient? Can you speak honestly, even when it might cost you? Because when you do, when you commit to that path, everything changes. You'll find yourself attracting new circles, not because you tried to fit in, but because you finally stood out. The right people will recognize you, not the version you created to be accepted, but the real you. You'll stop comparing yourself to others because your path will make sense. You'll see that you're not behind, you're not lacking, you're not broken. You're just different. And different was never a flaw. It was always the point. And most importantly, you'll begin to live in a way that feels light. No more pretending. No more editing. No more exhausting internal battles between who you are and who you're supposed to be. Just you. Free, full, and fearless. So don't hold back. Don't play small. Don't wait for someone else to tell you it's okay to be yourself. Make the decision. Cross the line. Tear off the mask. And don't look back. Because the world doesn't need another imitation. It needs what only you carry. And you were never meant to hide. There comes a moment in life when you have to look around and ask yourself a difficult question. How much of me have I given away just to make others feel more comfortable? Think about that. How often have you lowered your voice in a meeting so you wouldn't seem pushy? How often have you smiled through discomfort so someone else wouldn't feel awkward? How many times have you agreed silently with things that went against your values just to avoid conflict? It's a quiet form of self-abandonment. Not loud, not dramatic, but devastating all the same. And it starts early. In school, children learn that the ones who follow the rules get the gold stars. The ones who speak when it's their turn are praised, while the bold and outspoken are labeled disruptive. And from there, it carries into adulthood. The world hands out approval based on how well you blend in, how well you suppress your edge, how much you're willing to compromise your voice for the sake of keeping the peace. But peace at the cost of yourself is not peace. It's a prison. And many are living in that prison, polite, quiet, agreeable, apologetic. What they don't realize is that they've built a life around being digestible instead of being true. We live in a world that often rewards compliance over conviction. You're praised for being easy to work with, which often means you never challenge, never question, never disrupt. You're respected for being humble, which in certain environments is code for silent. And slowly, without even knowing it, people give up the sharpness of who they are just to be accepted by people who wouldn't know what to do with their real essence anyway. That is a dangerous game to play. Because when you suppress the fire within you for too long, it doesn't go away. It turns inward. It becomes frustration, resentment, depression, a deep H that whispers, there has to be more to me than this. And that whisper is right. But stepping back into your full expression means breaking some unspoken rules. It means not being so convenient. It means you're going to disrupt the image some people have of you. It means you will become less predictable. And for those who benefited from your silence, that will be uncomfortable. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people only loved the version of you that didn't challenge them. But the cost of that kind of love is too high. It's time to reclaim the parts of yourself you've kept hidden, the opinions you held back, the passions you suppressed, the brilliance you downplayed. You were never meant to be neutral. You were never created to play the background in your own life. You are here to leave a mark. And you don't do that by shrinking. You do it by stepping into every room as your full self. Not a version of yourself that's been trimmed down to make others feel taller. Not a watered down version that's easier to swallow. But the honest, unfiltered, unapologetic you. This doesn't mean being harsh. It doesn't mean being unkind. But it does mean being real. And real isn't always comfortable. Real speaks up when something's wrong. Real draws the line when someone crosses it. Real says, this is who I am, and doesn't backtrack when others frown. That kind of presence is rare. And yes, it will ruffle feathers. But feathers need ruffling when people have grown too used to everyone staying silent. You're not doing the world any favors by keeping quiet when your voice was made to carry. You're not protecting anyone by hiding your thoughts when your insight could change everything. You're not being polite by staying small. You're just delaying your own growth. The truth is, when you stop holding back, you allow others to do the same. Your courage becomes a mirror for theirs. Your fire lights their match. Your boldness opens the door they were too afraid to walk through. You create a ripple effect when you stop molding yourself to the comfort of others. And yes, it will cost you something. The approval of those who preferred your silence. The closeness of relationships built on your compromise. The illusion of peace that came from never rocking the boat. But what you gain, it's far more valuable. You gain clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from knowing you're no longer betraying yourself to be accepted. You gain strength. Because when you stop shrinking, your inner muscles grow. You learn how to stand in tension without backing down. You learn how to be misunderstood and still move forward. And most of all, you gain freedom. The kind of freedom that no one else can give you and no one else can take away. When you decide you're done adjusting yourself for people who don't even know how to handle the full spectrum of who you are. Everything shifts. Your energy changes. Your standards rise. Your path becomes clearer. And suddenly life feels lighter. Not because it's easier, but because you're no longer dragging the dead weight of false expectations. So no, you're not here to be palatable. You're not here to be convenient. You're not here to make sure no one else is ever uncomfortable. You're here to be true. And sometimes truth makes people squirm. Let them. Because your job is not to protect others from the power of who you are. Your job is to become so deeply rooted in that power that nothing and no one can cause you to retreat from it again. So raise your voice, even if it shakes. Stand tall, even if you're standing alone. And live with the conviction that who you are, fully, honestly, and boldly, is not too much. It's exactly right. Let the world adjust to you for once. There is a constant, often invisible, pressure pressing in on people every day. A pressure to show up as something polished, to be what others expect, to perform, to meet standards that aren't yours. And over time, if you're not careful, you don't even notice how much of your energy is being spent on the act. You get used to putting on a version of yourself every morning like a costume. The smile that says, "I'm fine," even when you're not. The nodding agreement when inside, you're screaming with disagreement. The silence when you want to speak. The politeness when you feel like running. The calm tone when your heart is racing. The composure when everything in your world feels like it's falling apart. And eventually, you master this performance. You get good at it. You know how to say the right thing, look the right way, do what's expected. You know how to avoid attention while still appearing present. You know how to blend in so well that nobody questions you. Not even yourself. But let's be honest, it's exhausting. Performing is not living, it's surviving. It's existing in a way that keeps others happy while slowly suffocating what's real inside of you. This performance might get you the job. It might win you applause. It might even make you popular in certain rooms. But it comes at a cost, and the cost is you. You lose the rawness, the edges, the spontaneity, the humanity that makes you whole. You become a diluted version of yourself. Less risky, maybe, but also less real. You forget what it feels like to say something without rehearsing it first. You forget what it feels like to walk into a room without wondering how you're being perceived. You forget what it feels like to just be. When you're constantly performing, you never feel fully seen, even when the spotlight is on you. Because deep down, you know that it's not really you receiving the praise. It's the act, the character, the version of yourself you thought others wanted. And that's the dangerous part, because even when you get the recognition, it doesn't satisfy. Even when people say they love you, you wonder, would they still love me if they saw all of me? You start to believe that your true self isn't worthy of the same affection, the same opportunity, the same attention. And so the mask becomes permanent. The act becomes your identity. But what if you walked off that stage? What if, just for once, you dropped the script? What if you let yourself show up messy, uncertain, unfiltered, and just human? Because the truth is, the people who matter most aren't drawn to your performance. They're drawn to your presence, your rawness, your honesty, your ability to be flawed and still show up, your ability to be vulnerable and still stay. The people who are worth building with aren't impressed by your mask. They're moved by your courage to take it off. Living from a place of performance keeps you constantly on edge, always editing, always analyzing, always afraid to say the wrong thing. But when you let that go, even just a little, you create space for something so much more powerful: connection. The real kind. The kind that doesn't require perfection. The kind that sees you for you and stays. And connection is what we're all longing for. Not attention, not praise, not popularity. Real connection. Soul-level, heart-deep connection. But that kind of connection requires honesty. It requires presence. It requires us to step away from the performance and into our real identity. But why is that so hard? Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that who we are isn't good enough. Maybe it was a parent who always demanded more. Maybe it was a teacher who shamed us for speaking out. Maybe it was a friend group that rewarded similarity and punished difference. Maybe it was a relationship where we had to change just to be accepted. And so, to survive, we learned to perform. We learned to shape-shift. We learned to become whatever we needed to be in order to avoid rejection. But that child who learned to perform is no longer in charge. You are. And now you have a choice. Will you continue to live based on a script written by fear and insecurity? Or will you write a new one? One that doesn't demand perfection, but welcomes presence. Here's the radical truth. You don't need to earn your worth. You never did. You don't need to meet impossible standards to be loved. You don't need to exhaust yourself trying to be enough. You already are. That doesn't mean you don't grow. It doesn't mean you stop striving for better. It means you stop pretending to be someone you're not in order to feel accepted. Because the acceptance that comes from inauthenticity never lasts. It keeps you trapped. It keeps you running on a treadmill that leads nowhere. But the moment you step off that treadmill, the moment you decide that you will no longer perform for love, for attention, for approval, that's the moment you get your life back. You start speaking with conviction, not caution. You start moving with purpose, not pressure. You start existing with peace, not panic. And the relationships you build from that place, they're different, they're deeper, they're sustainable. Because they're not built on who you pretend to be. They're built on who you are. So give yourself permission to stop the performance. Let people see you. Let them see your hesitation. Let them see your hope. Let them see your broken places and your brilliance side by side. Because that's what makes you powerful. Not the perfection, the presence. The ability to stay honest even when it's uncomfortable. The ability to show up real even when you're unsure how it will be received. And when you live like that, something beautiful happens. You begin to attract a life that aligns with who you truly are, not the one you had to pretend to be. So take off the costume, step out of character, and show the world the version of you that's been waiting backstage for far too long. The curtain doesn't have to rise for the performance to end. Sometimes it ends the moment you decide you're done. There is something unmistakably powerful about a person who walks in alignment with themselves. Not just someone who talks about self-belief or posts quotes about confidence, but someone who actually lives it. You can see it before they even say a word. It's not in the volume of their voice or the flashiness of their clothes. It's in their presence. It's in their eyes. It's in the way they walk, the way they make decisions, the way they enter a room and don't immediately start looking for a place to shrink. That kind of person doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. They don't need to prove their value. They know their value. They don't need to argue for their worth because they're not looking for external permission to exist. They move with clarity, with assurance, with a kind of inner strength that doesn't scream but speaks volumes. But let's be clear. That kind of presence doesn't come from pretending to be something you're not. It comes from doing the hard work of getting real with yourself, from facing who you truly are, flaws and all, and deciding that you're still going to move forward, not from arrogance, but from alignment. There's a quiet force in authenticity, a weight to it, and people can sense it. You don't have to announce that you've arrived. You don't have to tell everyone how real you are. When you're in alignment, people feel it before you ever say a word. But we live in a world that often confuses loudness with power, that thinks confidence must come with bravado, that assumes value comes from being flashy or aggressive. In that environment, someone who's genuinely aligned might go unnoticed at first. They're not seeking attention. They're not trying to manipulate a room. They're simply grounded in something deeper. That's the thing. When your confidence comes from a place of truth, not performance, it's unshakable because you're not pretending. You're not hoping no one finds out the real you. You're not constantly adjusting to fit in. You're settled, rooted, and that kind of stability is rare. Most people chase attention. They want to be seen, heard, validated. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be seen. But when that desire overrides your inner compass, you lose yourself in the pursuit. You start to build a life based on what works, what's rewarded, what's easy. And slowly, the alignment gets replaced by approval. The foundation shifts. And even though everything looks good on the outside, inside, something feels off. When you live for attention, your worth is always at risk because it depends on someone else's reaction. But when you live from a place of internal truth, that's where the real power comes from. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. You're not adjusting yourself to be liked. You've accepted yourself completely. You're not waiting for someone to tell you're enough. You already know. That's the kind of confidence that can't be faked. And it's rare because it takes work. It takes time and solitude when you get honest about what you believe and why. It takes moments of discomfort when you walk away from situations that no longer serve your soul. It takes the courage to disappoint others in order to stay true to yourself. But the reward, it's freedom. The freedom to speak without the weight of overthinking. The freedom to walk into any environment and know that you belong. Not because others say so, but because you decided to bring your full self. The freedom to release the fear of judgment because you've stopped judging yourself. You become someone who doesn't just exist, but inhabits life fully. Your steps become more intentional. Your words carry more meaning. Your boundaries become clearer. Your relationships get deeper. And you no longer waste energy trying to maintain a version of yourself that was never real to begin with. This doesn't mean you stop growing. It doesn't mean you stop listening to others. It means that you filter all external input through the lens of your truth. It means you know what matters to you. And you make decisions from that place, not out of fear or pressure. People will feel that when they're around you, they may not know what it is. They might say you have a calm energy or a quiet strength or a strong sense of direction. But what they're sensing is alignment. They're witnessing someone who isn't acting for the crowd, but is living from the center. That doesn't mean there won't be tension. Sometimes walking in that kind of clarity makes others uncomfortable, especially people who are used to seeing you in a smaller, more agreeable form. Some people may resist the new you, not because you're wrong, but because your growth challenges their comfort. But that's okay. Your job isn't to manage their emotions. Your job is to stay aligned. Because the people who are meant to walk with you won't need you to be anything other than who you are. They won't need you explain your strength, soften your edges, or shrink to fit their expectations. They will respect your honesty, admire your clarity, and match your integrity. And those are the people you build with. So don't measure your growth by applause. Measure it by alignment. Don't measure your strength by volume. Measure it by consistency. Don't measure your worth by how many people agree with you. Measure it by how deeply you agree with yourself. When you live from this place, life begins to open in new ways. You find opportunities that are made for you, not just handed to you because you're pleasing. You make choices that don't just look good, but feel right. You wake up with a sense of peace, not because everything is perfect, but because you're not pretending anymore. This is where real confidence is born. This is where legacy is built. This is where power becomes peace. So walk in that, own that, and keep returning to it every single day. Because when you're no longer seeking to be noticed, but to live in truth, you unlock a kind of life that few ever find, but everyone secretly longs for. You were never meant to be a copy, a shadow, or a watered-down version of someone else. You were born with a voice, a vision, and a presence that no one else carries. And the most courageous thing you can ever do in this life is to become the full, unfiltered version of you. Every time you choose to stop hiding, every time you reject the mask, every time you speak when it's easier to stay silent, you step into your real power. Not the kind of power that's based on performance, titles, or appearances, but the kind that comes from deep alignment with your soul. And yes, that path is hard. Yes, it will challenge everything you've been taught about fitting in, about staying small, about earning approval. But that path is worth it, because on that path, you don't just find your voice, you find your peace. You find your people, you find your purpose. You stop editing yourself to fit into rooms that were never built for the real you. You stop trading your truth for temporary comfort. You stop sacrificing your soul for surface, level validation. And in doing so, you rise. You rise into the version of yourself that doesn't just survive, but thrives. You rise with courage. You rise with clarity. You rise not to be accepted by the world, but to make your mark on it, fully, fiercely, freely. So this is your call. not to become something else, not to chase someone else's idea of success, but to return to the bold, beautiful, honest version of yourself that's been buried under fear, expectation, and doubt. No more hiding, no more shrinking, no more apologizing for being who you were always meant to be. The world doesn't need another act. It doesn't need another echo. It needs you, the real you. So walk in it. Speak from it. Live by it. Be the authentic you. And let the world feel what truth looks like in human form.